Hello and welcome to Uncensored Conservatism. This is episode number 365, and I'm going to continue my discussion on race relation. And let's start back in the 1950s. So there was this famous Supreme Court case known as Brown versus Board of Education, and the court heard arguments but then held over the case until the next term when they handed down their landmark decision, which involved education. Now, prior to that, the Supreme Court had adopted a policy known as separate but equal when it came to the segregation of races. For example, segregation was allowed as long as the black person's accommodations were roughly equal to those of the whites, as best as possible. Anyway, Brown versus Board of Education rejected that notion, and if you read the decision in detail, you will notice that they rejected the separate but equal doctrine based on a shitload of sociological and psychological studies. In fact, they noted that segregation stigmatized minorities, and this had a bad effect on their educational outcomes. And even today, we hear in Supreme Court decisions comments to the fact that racial, ethnic, or even sexual diversity or integration enhances the educational experience for all involved. We hear it in the mantra from the left that diversity is our greatest strength, which I argue that diversity is not necessarily a strength. Diversity of thought is a strength, but not diversity based on what your skin color, the language you speak, or your genitalia, or what you think your genitalia is. Now, that was the 1950s, but what has changed between then and now? If segregation was a bad thing in the 1950s, why is it sort of okay now? And by that I mean self-segregation, where blacks or any minority demand their own dorms, their own clubs, their own safe spaces, their own speakers, and now even their own graduation ceremonies. I guess it's because they voluntarily segregate. That's the difference maker here. But if segregation is so terrible, as the Supreme Court said in 1955, and practically every Supreme Court case in this area reminds us of the positive effects of integration, then it makes no difference whether the segregation is voluntary or not, right? It's wrong. It's just bad, period. End of story. And look at the aftermath of that decision. And I'm not talking about Lester Maddox or George Wallace ranting on the steps of some schools. Those most supportive of forced integration suddenly found out that they weren't so much for integration when it applied to them. And I'm talking about forced busing. The hypocrisy was grand at the time. It was fine when there was busing in that podunk South. But when it came to the Tony neighborhoods of Boston and elsewhere, suddenly integration went out the window. It's like those people on Martha's Vineyard with their all are welcome here banners in their gardens. They were all welcoming of illegal immigrants until Ron DeSantis sent a busload of illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. They were shipped out of there pretty damn quickly. And it's also evident with the proliferation of minority-specific fields of studies in colleges. We have black studies, women's studies, gender studies, Hispanic studies, Mexican-American studies, and so on, indigenous people, Asian Pacific, blah, 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 blah. Well, lump them all together and just call it grievance studies and be done with it. And think about graduates with a degree in black studies, for example. I mean, what do you do with that degree? I mean, it's simple. You become a professor of black studies at some college, and that is all the degree is good for. Think of anyone you know with a degree in any grievance study. Chances are they're in the field of education or a barista at your local Starbucks. So these so-called experts get their 15 minutes of fame or less on some panel on CNN or MSNBC, and that's about it. They talk about alleged dog whistle remarks and say it's racist to say something. Once we had a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, education split off, but they dropped the word welfare because it was a racist dog whistle. Too many people associated welfare with black people, so out the term went. Now, illegal immigrant is a dog whistle, even though the immigrant entered the country illegally, and on it goes. It's just a bunch of people with too much time on their hands coming up with shit to deny reality. And people on the right walk on eggshells and fall for this crap. It would be better. They would contribute more to society if these race grifters were Starbucks baristas. And as for the college students who are triggered by innocuous comments, who can't take a fucking joke or a meme, and who graduate to spew this nonsense, maybe they shouldn't be in college in the first place. I also find it somewhat ironic and hypocritical that apparently diversity is strength and segregation is bad, except when you self-segregate and there is no diversity. And this is especially true in the case of historically black colleges and universities. They seem to get special treatment and funding from the federal government. I mean, if we want to talk reparations, let's subtract the total government support and subsidies from these colleges over the years from the final price tag. That's fine if you want to have or want to or you want to attend or have attended a historically black college and you want support for them. All the more power to them, and all the more power to you. But don't in your next fucking breath assert that all segregation is bad and that diversity is a fucking strength, because your support for these colleges undoes all of that. And what's with all the hyphenated Americans these days? It's fine to be proud of your ethnic heritage and all that, but now no one is simply an American these days. During the Constitutional Convention, there was a great discussion about citizenship requirements to hold certain offices, and one of the delegates noted that anyone so willing to renounce their previous country's citizenship is equally apt not to accept American citizenship, to assimilate into American culture, adopt our language, which is English, or American politics. Boy, was he correct. There's a world of difference between the immigrant of the past, those that came through Ellis Island or whatever, and today's immigrant. Now, my maternal grandparents were from Slovakia. I'm half Slovakian. I don't walk around calling myself a Slovakian American. I could, but I don't. I'm simply an American. And the reason is that my grandparents assimilated into American culture and adopted English as their primary language. They still spoke Slovak, which sounded like gibberish to me, but they didn't say they were Slovakian American. But that's not the case these days. So let's just drop the fucking hyphens and get with the program. And another thing that makes me say, is the phenomena of crime when it comes to the black community. What the fuck is up with that? If one white dude with a gun shoots 6 people in a mass shooting, the left crawls out of the woodwork and demands so-called common sense gun control. But the black gangbangers can kill each other with impunity in places like St. Louis and Chicago. Because it's black on black crime, then we hear crickets. They, the left, say accurately, I might add, that red conservative states have the highest rate of gun homicides per capita than blue liberal states. What they don't tell you is where in those red states the bulk of the gun homicides occur. In St. Louis, Missouri. It ain't in the conservative central part of the state. It's in the cities of St. Louis and Kansas City, 2 cities with liberal Democratic mayors and large minority populations. Louisiana, look no further than New Orleans. Same thing, another liberal stronghold with a large minority population. Take those large minority population centers out of the state's crime statistics, and red conservative states look a hell of a lot better. But they don't tell you about that little detail. When they do admit there is a black on black crime problem, they'll deflect and blame it on a variety of factors. Oh, it's the drug gangs because there aren't enough available services or jobs for black kids, so they turn to crime. Or the schools don't get enough funding, so they drop out and turn to crime. Or it's poverty that causes the crime, and on it goes. Well, guess what? There's plenty of white kids who don't have enough social services or jobs, who are uneducated and unemployed, and who drop out of school, who come from poverty-stricken backgrounds. But we don't read too much about white-on-white drug gangs shooting each other up. So now, it's something in black culture. When you're 14% of the population but commit 51% of the murders in this country, something is seriously askew. It's cat. And again, I trace this to the demise of the black nuclear family structure, where a black kid is 7 times more likely than a white kid to come from a home with a single parent, usually the mother, with no male model figure around. And that emanates from the codification of the victim mentality by errant policies and laws dating back to the 1960s. And my final observation is with the statue thing and with George Floyd, the removal of statues of the Confederate battle flag. Are they seriously suggesting that a flag inspired a little puke like Dylan Roof in South Carolina to shoot up a black Bible study group one day? The flag thing started with him, And the statue thing with Fentanyl Floyd up in Minneapolis. George Floyd was not a hero. He was a drug addict. He was a white beady piece of shit, quite frankly. Did he deserve to die? No, but we did get rid of a bad egg. No, but neither should he have been placed on a pedestal either. I remember where someone painted a mural of him on the side of a wall when we had troops in Afghanistan. The Afghans thought it was a mural of Barack Obama. What an insult to Obama. I mean, he's worthy of insult, but not as low as comparing him or mistaking him for George Floyd. Then it, as predicted, spread beyond the Confederate battle flags to statues of Confederate generals. Names were removed from military bases, statues brought down or vandalized, and names on buildings changed on elite Ivy League campuses and elsewhere because of some tenuous tie to slavery. There was even a body of some Confederate general, I think it was in Tennessee, exhumed from his grave and moved to an area outside the city. Even might as well have just pissed on his grave. But anyway, removing the name on a building or tearing down a statue. If you believe that somehow corrects a previous wrong or magically erases racism in the country, you also believe a Confederate flag inspires someone to kill blacks in a church in Charleston, South Carolina. That also makes you an intellectual retard, okay? Well, here's a fact for you. A lot of those people who wrote the longest lasting constitution in the world were slaveholders, many of whom argued during the Constitutional Convention against slavery. And what statues of Christopher Columbus had to do with race relations was never fully explained to me, but I guess the woo Indians, not the turka with the dots in their heads, Indians had to get in on the act while the iron was hot. Anyway, it kind of pisses me off, all this stuff. And that's about it for today. Join me again tomorrow, I think, for another episode of Uncensored Conservatism. Okay, thank you. Have a great day. More blessings tomorrow.